Today's lecture is going to be on, well, first of all, welcome back. I've been off for a little while getting settled at a new job, but now that I have some time off finally, hopefully I can start up these lectures again. Yeah, with that being said, let's get to it. Today's lecture is going to be on small Tesuji's. We're not going to be looking into the big fancy moves that you play on the board and then dramatic background music happens and suddenly you win the game. But instead, these the moves that we're going to go over are small things that when you focus and you can find them, they will let you slowly but surely take advantage of your opponent and get a lead over your opponent, and oftentimes they'll work substantially better than I guess you would call the generic move when played properly, of course. So, with that being said, let's get started with the first one. So, this is a situation, or at least a joseki, that I think most of you are at least somewhat familiar with. A fair point, actually. That's actually interesting. You could, I guess, consider sometimes the Tesuji is the generic correct move. I guess you're right. I wasn't being very exact. I guess the better thing to say would be these moves are specialized moves that are not usually the generic move, that can only be played in certain situations. So you're right, I wasn't very specific. Alright, so this is a joseki that we often see. And, well, not often, but it's played. And there's a number of things that black can do here. If black wants to build himself a wall along this top area over here, black wants to build himself a wall, there's a lot of potential moves that he could consider. Who wants to give me any examples? What might be a move that black might consider if he wants to build a wall along the top from here, assuming it's black's move again? So we have G17 and H16. Two very interesting moves, and both very useful to look at. Anyone else have any ideas, or are we just going to stick with these two? Okay, these are a good place to start. So let's take a look at G17. This is probably one that most people are already familiar with. The idea with this move usually is that you're going to sacrifice the two stones, and in exchange for giving white some additional territory, black is going to build himself increased thickness. And this is usually a pretty good idea if you want to further solidify your corner. And of course, it also gives you this G15 move almost for free, which is also pretty nice. But if you want to build a wall, this might not be the best idea. This is more of a move to solidify yourself and build a bigger corner. But if you want to extend your wall, this probably isn't the move you want to use. It's good, but there's another move that's a bit better. And H16 here is the move of choice that I want to look at. This is a small move, oftentimes overlooked. Many times Q players here will play just G15, which is usually a very bad move that you should not play here. This move can be very simple or very complicated, really depending on what white wants to do. So if white just decides to play very, very nicely with you, white could play here, and you can just come back, and white can fill, and black is fairly satisfied. If we go back to the original situation, this would be like, yeah, black is thrilled. This would be like black plays here, and then white plays here, and then black gets to play here. And this would usually never happen in a game. I mean, nobody would play G17 here instead of H16. So no, it's a small difference. But let's look at a situation where the difference is a bit more pronounced. Oops, wrong one. Let's take a look at this one. This is one that looks a lot more pronounced with. So this is a shape that we often see. White has two stones here, and there's a cutting point. But black can't use the cutting point because, of course, white has the stone around J17. Many Q players actually, when they have just the first three stones, will actually extend to J17. But usually an extension to J17 isn't a great idea. And one of the reasons is because of this next move. So this is actually the same Tesuji, but it's a lot more severe. It's a lot more severe here. And once again, it's this move. And if white decides to just play nicely, well, first off, if white wants to defend himself, what should white defend himself with? What's the best defense move? Ah, that's an interesting question. G17 or H17? One, I will assure you, is much better than the other. Which one is better and why? Why is G17 better? Well, that's great. You can say the move, but that doesn't really give me reasoning. That's just, 3 characters on your computer screen. Understanding the reason behind why a move is good is pretty important. Yeah, there's some awesome logic. Okay, so the main reason is basically a free forcing move. Yeah, essentially. So let's say white goes here and black goes here. Well, white basically has to play G17 now, and this is the situation we have. Whereas if white plays H16, black plays G17, black connects, well, maybe white will play H17, but white doesn't have to. Maybe white will decide to play something else. White isn't forced at gunpoint to play H17 here. So this gives white some extra flexibility. So that makes, in this case, G17 a little bit better. But this is just a little subtle difference. The main thing we have to focus on is, what if white decides to counterattack? Well, there's only really one counterattack move. What's white's counterattack move? If white wants to try and counter black's Tesuji. Yep, G15. So white is going to extend upwards. And now black has a few choices once again. So black can, of course, either cut, and the cut is a simple move for black. Usually white will just cut him back and give him the 2 stones. And black will increase the size of his corner, and white will build a moderate amount of thickness. So if black just wants to be very, very simple and trade, he can do this. On the other hand, if black wants to continue fighting with white, the idea is you just go in and cut. And white fills, and black descends. And naturally, this looks like a very messy position. And it is. And whether this is good or bad for black totally depends on what's going on the rest of the board. Who controls the upper right corner? Who's strong in the center? Who's strong in the right side? And depending on those factors is really going to be determining whether or not black's 3 stones are the ones that come under attack, or white's string of stones come under attack. So you really have to think about the whole board before you play a Tesuji like this. Well, it depends how much you want to split white. Because both sides are heavy, yes. I would agree. Both sides have formed heavy groups from this. So it can create difficult fights. But in the right situation, it can be a very powerful attack. Now, let's say white wants to counterattack here. Let's say white doesn't want to play H17. Well, white can still try and counterattack black, actually. White can actually play G18. And this can turn into a very complicated fight. So black, of course, needs to play here, and white connects. And now we have a rather large fight on our hands. Black's 3 stones and white's 2 stones are both kind of floating. Furthermore, black's 4 stones and white's 5 stones are pretty close to alive. But, hi, Raikuzan. But neither of them are totally alive. So once again, this is a situation where you really have to look at what's going on elsewhere on the board. Now, the difference between the Tesuji and, the simple basic move, if you just play G15, white's just going to usually respond here. And it also depends on the left, sure. And, if you want to build a moyo with this, it's pretty tough to build a continued wall here, because white's shape here is really kind of perfect. Especially if white manages to control the upper right here, white can build himself a pretty big moyo in response. So just, haneing on top is usually not good enough if you want to just build a big moyo for yourself. On the flip side, if you can manage to pull this move off, it's now a lot harder for white to play... Yes, if you play it wrong, it absolutely can cause you to lose. No, absolutely. If you play H16 in the wrong place, it absolutely can cause bad things to happen to you, which is why it's, I wouldn't call it the standard move, it's more of a specialized move. Oh, G15, well, G15 can absolutely cause you to lose. Yeah, it's usually considered a pretty soft move if you can't play H16. But yeah, this was a fairly straightforward situation. Let's go to one of my favorites. This is one that I particularly like, and I first saw it years ago in a game from Gosagen. It wasn't this exact corner situation, but the Tesuji itself was. And how Gosagen played it was very interesting. So I don't know how much you guys know about Gosagen's style, but he didn't like to let his opponent get away with anything. And I mean anything. If he thought his opponent was taking 1 point more than he should be allowed to have in a certain area, he would just fight to the death to stop him from getting that 1 extra point. So this was a situation, or at least this cutting point was the situation in the game that I saw. And first off, well, this isn't a difficult question. What's Black's move here when White cuts? Yeah, R2, not the most difficult move to find. And then White goes here. And now, the standard move to play here, which many people play without even blinking, is S2. Because S2, of course, ensures that White's 2 stones are captured. And, it helps Black out a little bit. But now what White usually does, who knows what's White's next move here? P2, almost. Lots of moves, sure, but there's one that's more common than most of the others. Yeah, O2 is usually the most common move here. And that, of course, is a Sente move that Black needs to respond to, and sometimes Black will play P2 or P1 or Q1, and sometimes Black will just directly capture the 2 stones. Both have advantages and disadvantages, and are pretty subtle in terms of when you should play each of them. But the main point is White gets this O2 move free. Now, the question that's raised is, well, if White can get this O2 move free, well, why do you even need to play those 2 stones? Why doesn't White just play O2 right here? Why does he even need to play the R3 first? Any ideas? Why not just play O2 directly? Well, that's part of it. It's true that there's no Atari, although the P2 move actually isn't right for Black. If Black wants to respond, Black should actually play Q2, which is the proper shape here to defend himself with. This move has some problems to it. White can usually get this move in Sente, and this is very annoying actually because Black has to play here, and that gives White the ability to play this move. And so this can be very annoying endgame for Black to deal with. So usually the proper response if Black wants to respond is Q2. However, if Black wants, Black can just Tanuki here. And you know what? If White plays R3, well, what can Black do? Yeah, exactly. Black can play S3 if he wants. Now, it's true he loses some points, but, maybe there's something else. Yeah, sacrifice. Maybe there's something else in the upper left side of the board that's going to get Black more points than this loss. And if Black loses 8 points here, but gains 12 points in the upper left, that's a great deal for Black. Black is perfectly fine with that. So the key to playing R3 first is that you're forcing White, or you're forcing Black into a course of action as White. By playing this first, you are forcing Black to play R2 right now, because, if it's like this, you're never going to play S3. I mean, that's absurd. You're giving away free points. So because Black is forced to play R2 here, that's why you play R3 first. However, once White plays here, there's a little Tesuji that Black has if he wants to play dangerously. There's a small Tesuji here. No need to sacrifice, just push White towards the edge. I don't understand. In what case? You mean after you have O2 here? I'm not... Oh, this? This doesn't work, though. I don't understand what you're looking for. Yeah, almost. The key is O2. So what? So anyway, what in this game I saw, what Goseken's opponent did, And what many players will sometimes do is small Tesuji here. Yes, Gosekin's opponent played O2 here, in the hope that white plays the generic move of N2, and then black goes back and plays S2. Now, who can tell me what's the difference here? What has this exchange done for black? Q2? Yes. Oh, you mean black Q2? Yes. Exactly. Well, it could mess with white's outer wall if black manages to get the P2 move later, but the main point is black can no longer, or white can no longer play O2. O2 doesn't exist as a move that white can play because black has a stone there. If white wants to gain points here, white has to play P2, which black just plays here, and white has to end in gote. So white loses sente here, and sente and gote is a huge difference from one another. So white has essentially lost sente here. Now, there's a reason why players don't do this in every game, and that's because if white wants, he can get very, very complicated in response. So what Gosekin did when his opponent played O2, Gosekin's move was S2. So what he's doing here is white is intending to take the corner from black, and in exchange, let black live on the side. And that's a very, very, very difficult decision to make in terms of determining who gains and loses more points. Very, very complicated. So the usual idea of what happens here is that black will continue to extend, and then white has to capture here. And then what usually happens is black will have to defend his N2 group. But in this case, black can't, because these stones are essentially dead. You know, if black wants them to live, I mean, he might have to do this, and he can probably manage to make seki if black does this, but this is a terrible result for black. Black is horrified by this result. Now, sometimes you can make it work as black, but a good question is, well, what happens if black decides to defend directly? Well, white, of course, has to play N2. And then we have an interesting question of who wins this corner fight. And this is a pretty complicated read. It's actually another Tesuji in there of who wins the corner fight. So what's black's first move here to fight this corner with white? Well, all sorts of moves. So the Tesuji here is actually another small Tesuji that everyone should be aware of, just in terms of how to fight it out in the corner when you don't have many liberties. There's a reason why black usually can't play this way, although sometimes he can. Okay, so the consensus seems to be P1. Well, there's a lot of things that can happen. White, of course, needs to take the eye away, and black could attempt to play N1, but white's intention now, white basically has to start a ko with black. That's the only way for white. If black wants to play this way, black could throw in and throw in again, but now we have a ko fight on our hands, and basically you can play it out a million different ways. You know, black could throw in directly and play down, but we're still just going to have a giant ko on our hands at the end of the day. Still ko. Oh, seki. How is seki possible? Interesting question. Interesting. I think it's almost universally ko. White plays T3. Oh, this one. Oh, you mean this move? It's still not really, though. Because black can do this. So, I mean, maybe, but not really. 99% of the time, it's ko. Now, the other black move that black can play, that white has to know how to counter, is what if black plays S1? White has to know how to counter this move. This is a move that comes up in a lot of corner fights, and a lot of people make mistakes with it. Any ideas? What should white do about it? Ah, R1. Okay, and then black captures. And then? Well, if we do the O1 strategy, who's going to win the liberty fight? Yeah, it's pretty clear black's going to win this liberty fight. Ah, T1. Yes. This is a very hard move to see. But the 2-1 point is a very strange move on the go board. White does this. And no matter what black does here, white can force a ko out of it. Yeah, if white plays that, black can go like this, and we have ourselves a ko. Now let's say black decides to be more complicated. Let us say that if black plays n1, white can just come back and basically do the same thing. And it's still ko. And the idea here is no matter how you play it out, there's a million ways to make ko here. But they all end up making ko, as long as you play correctly. Wasn't it a two-step ko the other way? Yeah, you have a local threat here. Yeah, you have a two-step ko threat. So yeah, this is a bit better of a ko, since it's a two-step ko. Good point. So yeah, slightly better ko. But the key idea here is that it's still ko, as long as you play it properly. And so what ended up happening in Gosekin's game was that Gosekin lived in the corner. His opponent played the N2 move. Goseigen lived in the corner, and unlike in this situation that I made up, black's R4 stones were independently alive. So what happened here was black managed to make tiny life for himself with the N2 group, but Goseigen managed to win. And this is just this fight. This whole fight sparked over a small Tesuji to maybe gain black, 2 or 3 points. But there's some severe counterattacks that can happen if you're not careful. So O2 is a move that you should play with caution. You have to be very confident that your opponent cannot play S2 and get a successful result from it. Nevertheless, a very good small Tesuji to know, and one of my favorites. All right, let's take a look at the next one. This is one that I'll just go over for a second. Most of you should already be very familiar with it, but well, there's a lot of things that can happen here. We're talking about white's move, and the usual idea for white here is to play something either n5 or to slide into the corner. That's the usual idea for what white should do here. But sometimes it's a very cute move, but a lot of people don't know how to respond to it. Is what happens if white tries to just bust through directly, like this. And it's important to know how to counter it. So black can usually manage to play L5, and white can hane there. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that white plays K7. And let's say black wants to connect his two groups. There's other things black can do, but what happens if black needs to connect these two groups? How should black connect them? Is there a way to connect them? Yep. Good. L3, yes. L3 is the move. And now? Yeah, J3. The J3 works fine here. The more usual idea is K2, but J3 works fine. And no matter which way white plays, black does the other one. And white cannot play K4 here, of course, so black gets to capture. And this is the usual reason why directly cutting through like that doesn't usually work. And it keeps white very low, right? So usually cutting through like that, unless white is very, very strong in the area, it generally doesn't work very well. Just a quick one I wanted to show. It's a good little test to know. All right, this one is another good one to know that I see a lot of mistakes with. Okay, so, black probably should have responded at this point to defend his group because white has two extremely strong groups on both sides. But let's say white wants to continue his attack. First off, first question I guess would be, this isn't really a Tesuji, but what might be a move that white wants to do to attack these two black stones? And we'll assume for the sake of argument that he wants to attack from above, because you could always say that you could try and steal the eyes, but we'll assume he wants to attack from above. K5, always a good move to consider. And N5. Oh, yeah, N5, so the two capping moves essentially. Just name every move on the list, huh? Alright, so a lot of these moves have positives and negatives. The two moves that I think are likely to be best here as M4 and K5, especially K5 here. But both of them are okay. The problem with N5 here, the problem with N5 here is that it's a little too easy for black to get himself out here. There's just not quite enough pressure that black can put on, that white can put on black now. If we flip it, on the other hand, this extra white stone that we put down is putting a substantial amount of pressure on black. Black doesn't have two eyes yet. White's doing very well, but the Tesuji we want to look at today is not that move actually. It's what happens if black does this. What should white do about this move? Because a lot of people I see kind of are really scared to play capping moves because most players just automatically play J4, say, oh, I'm going to slice you in half. So let's see what possibilities are there for a response. Let's see, we have L3, L2, H6. Lots of interesting ones. And N5. Okay, let's take a look at these. So my problem with N5, I guess, is that it really lets black off the hook very easily. Black kind of gets out here without too many problems. And I mean, it's nice to have that wall, I suppose. But it's not like white's wall is substantially stronger than if black managed to get N5. It kind of leaves K5 in still a fair amount of danger. So it's a little bit passive, I think, for white to play here. This is an interesting move. I don't know if I've seen it before. I suppose this does potentially press black down, but I think it might be a little bit too nice. What does white do when black just does this move? Good answer, good answer. I think it's a little bit too nice to black. Black can make a fairly decent shape without too many problems, and white could consider doing that, I suppose. But, I mean, black could do this, at least, and, black has better eye shape for it. Or if black really wants to play simple for himself, he could just do this and really let white cut him. And this makes simpler life, at least, and some decent shape, although it gives white a lot in exchange. So I would put a lot of caution into using that strategy. But it's a little bit too nice in terms of the eye shape. Oh, this is an interesting move, actually. This is so this is a sacrifice play. You could definitely consider this move. This is, we could say, one possibility if you want to use it. So the usual idea is either black plays up here, and then white can come back. And if white really wants to be vicious, he could just do this. And black isn't particularly thrilled with this kind of result. So white can be fairly satisfied. Of course, if black goes the other way, white goes up here. And black cuts. Now, black can actually win this fight in terms of the two stones. But let's see what happens. First you get a forcing move. Then you cut. Black has to Atari. Atari, and wouldn't you know it, locally, he's still not alive yet. So L2 is absolutely a possible move here. Now the other move actually is also possible when you don't want to give your opponent eyes, or when you think that L2 helps him too much. You can actually play another move. For example, if black really wanted here, instead of M2, black could consider this move to get himself into the center very easily. Yeah, so the problem with L2 is that it rips out the base, but if you really wanted to seal him inside, then it's not good enough. Now if you want to seal him inside, however, H6 is the special move here. And this is basically a knight's seal, and it's a fantastic sealing move. F3 really provides a lot of support. A lot of Q players will try to play, when they're first starting out, they'll try to play H5, which usually fails very badly. And then when players get a bit stronger, they'll usually try, J5 and H4, and both of those usually don't work out too well. But the ideal move you usually want to play in this kind of situation is either G5 or H6, which are the two knight seal moves. And which one you play depends on which side is stronger. Since the K5 stone is weaker, you want to play the knight's move closer to it. So let's see what black can try and do to escape. Oh, of course, yeah, G6 is, G6. Yeah, I suppose there might be situations where that's okay. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So if black tries to use the diagonal, sure, black has created some cutting points, but white is still pretty solid here. Yeah, black can die. That's that's a fair assessment. Black is very unhappy with this kind of result. You don't seem to like the black player very much. So, the key move here, though, is F3, because F3 provides a lot of support for white. If white doesn't have F3, you can still actually consider doing this, but what you're going to end up doing is doing a sacrifice play instead. So, for example, if we consider the same result, or we do the same thing as before, there's an additional cutting point here. And if black wants, he could just go in and take it like this. And white's result, is still a fairly decent result. There's no reason for white to be particularly saddened by this. But it's just good to know if you don't have as much support, you're generally going to end up sacrificing something with the knight's seal move. So nevertheless, a very good Tesuji to be aware of. But okay, let's go on to the next one. This is one that I just see mistakes made again and again and again and again and again. And I thought I had to do this because there's so many things that can go wrong and can go right depending on what you do in this kind of situation. So, one of the first questions that a player asks himself really is, if you're black, do you play A or do you play B? And is one move always better than the other? What situations do you play one in versus the other? And it is not, this one involves Endgame, but also Tessujis. Endgame and Tessujis kind of go hand in hand. So first off, the question is, well, the ideal move, generally speaking, that black wants is B. This is usually what we might call the better move for black. If black is not playing H2, then it's for one of two reasons. Either A, black critically has to take J2 in Sente because there's another really important move that black just has to make, or B, black has very carefully calculated out the endgame, and he has found that J2 is all he needs. Or he's read that H2 doesn't work. So three situations. Either it doesn't work, either you have to keep Sente here no matter what, or either you just don't want to make any complications because you're winning. And if you don't meet those conditions, then generally speaking, you need to play H2 because it's almost always a better move, just in terms of points. Unless the center is totally unvaluable to you, it's almost always better on points. So, I'm sure the variation that we're all familiar with, black can play this, and then he can Hana in the bottom, and white ends like this. And this is very, very, very simple. And of course, white can do the same exact thing. You know, white can play here, and black can respond, and everything is very, very, very simple. And since it's double sente here, there's a lot of pressure for both sides to play a move. So, you know, nothing particularly complex about that question. But when you choose to play h2, it can get a lot more interesting. So, well, the ideal move that black wants, of course, what's the move that black wants white to play? You know, what's the move that black wants him to play? Yeah, g2. In terms of raw points, that's the move black wants, because then black can usually just play back. It's arguable. We'll go into what happens when white plays the other move too. But this is a situation that black really wants, because if we look at it, if we compare, this is like, you know, comparing it to the original situation. This is like black played j2, and then white played g2, and then black played h2. And normally this would be, you know, an absurd thing for white to do. This would be absurd for white to do. So black is usually satisfied with this. Now, it's not, of course, 100% mandatory for white to play another move, but if white fails to play another move, what should black do? What's the move if white fails to play another move? Yeah, f2 here is pretty effective here. If you know, if white descends, you can either try to be pretty vicious and go like this. This is going to lead to a lot of complexity, though. I actually haven't read out all of the variations for this move, so you'd have to be very, very cautious that this move works before doing it. Or the other idea, of course, is just to play this move. And black is usually fairly satisfied with this, because you've just cut off 2 stones, you've reduced white's corner. It's generally a fine result. So your hope is that white plays another move. But of course, that's, you know, only when white decides to play very simple. Now, the reason why many players are scared to play h2 is, well, what if white plays the other move? What if white cuts off the stone? And this leads to a lot of complications. So the simple variation of what happens here is that black cuts, and white ataris, and black ataris. White extends, black will usually play down, and white captures, and then black plays up here. And whether or not this is better or worse for black really, really depends on what's going on in the center right now. You know, is this a really valuable area for black in this game? How important is it that black cut off this stone? If getting in g4 allows black to develop a lot more in the center, or, you know, develop a fair amount more in the center, then it's a fine trade for black. But remember, you've also given white a few more points on the bottom, and you've also given white an endgame move at k1, which is fairly nice for white. So you have to really look carefully into whether or not this is good enough for you. As this is really the key consideration: is this result good enough for you? And if your opinion is that this result is not good enough for you as black, then in general you shouldn't be doing h2. Although there are some more complicated things you can do as black. Now let's say, for the sake of argument, that it's a little bit different. That black has himself a very solid group on the other side. And, you know, white's corner, well, white's corner is solid. I mean, I don't see any direct invasions that black is easily able to make, but still there's a little bit of feeling that it's a little bit thin. You know, it's not 100%. And we can use that with h2, actually. White needs to be very, very cautious here if he's going to try j2 here, because j3 is not the only black response that black can make here. Yes, g3 is actually a devastating move here for black to play. White is in a lot of trouble when this happens. Now, if white just tries to cut on through, black can basically just do this. And white could consider making a rather large ko here, but black is probably not too sad about having a ko to fight in white's corner. So if white captures, black can just play like this. And then there's a lot of things that white can consider doing. And this is a trade, and it's a very situation dependent, again, on who gained more. Black clearly lost a good chunk in his bottom, and white clearly lost, almost a very large chunk of his corner. So who gained more here really, really depends on who. It really depends on the individual situation. Now let's say white tried something else. What if white plays h4? What do you guys think? What should black do? Yeah, f2 is the idea. Yeah, and then, so white could start a ko, but once again, ko is really what black wants. This is the middle of white's area, and if black can start a ko here, that's pretty favorable for him. So if white connects back up, black can live without too much of a problem. Black can take a shape point and build himself some I shape, slide, and even if white really tries, this is a terrible result for white. Yeah, white basically screams in agony at this result. White ends up with very, very little. And there's an e5 cut. Yeah, that just kind of adds pain onto the misery. So what happens if what if white does this? What if white is absolutely determined to try and kill these black stones? What should black do now? Any ideas? Lots of ideas. Every move under the sun. Yeah, it's there's a lot of complexity to look at here. Well, let's see what happens. If black plays the simple extension, white can continue to seal him in. Black can make some shape for himself. And there's a lot of things white can do. If white is just absolutely demanding to stop black from making anything, the fight turns pretty bad for white. Because after black cuts, black has another cut here, and white's in a lot of danger. White basically dies pretty badly here. And there's a lot of variations to go into in terms of what black can do, but the point of this lecture isn't to go into each and every possible variation here. You can do that if you have time in your game to practice your reading. The point to look at is just that there are an immense number of complications, and that after white plays j2, his corner is not safe anymore. There are a lot of things that black can do to try and mess with it, which really just lends more power to the potential of a move like h2, and what you can do with it if you are ambitious enough. There's a lot of complications in here. So that was a good one to look at. Okay. No, I don't know what that is. This is a very good one, actually. And I'd like our Don players to not answer this one. So this is another one of my favorites. This is a Tesuji that people should know because it appears in a surprising number of corner situations that we really don't expect it to. So at first glance, it looks like white is really, really dead in this corner, and black has captured him. But in reality, it's a little bit more complicated. So does anyone know what white could possibly do to start a big fight in this corner with his 3 stones? Or shall we just say white to get the best result? Well, sure, S17, of course, is the natural move, the only way. But now what? We have S18 and R18. Okay, let's say we do R18. And now? S19, very good. You already know this one. Yep, S19 is the way to go. So no matter what black does here, black could capture and white still makes a ko. Or black could play T18 and white still makes a ko with Q19. And it's a really fun ko to play, actually, because it looked like at first glance like this was black's corner no problem, but it just turns into a total ko. And it's not always easy to see at first, But once you really get down to understanding this one, you will be amazed how often you see it appear. I've done it a few times against fellow Don players. It's very fun, actually. Okay, let's take a look at this one. This is another very common move that we see, but a lot of variations aren't even considered in this one that really should be. So black and white are fighting it out here, and it's black's turn. And the normal black move, of course, is just to play, M5 very, very simply, and get your stones out. And we can't say that this is a wrong move here, but there are other more aggressive possibilities if black either wants to get himself out faster, or maybe black wants to try and get sente for himself. There are other ideas, and one of the possibilities that black can consider, yes, R2 is one actually. You don't like K4? And K4 is sometimes one that you can consider. And you need to be very cautious about playing K4, because when you do it in the wrong situation, you can really allow your opponent to build up a lot of territory or thickness when you don't have to. It's something of a special purpose move when you just need to get yourself out faster than a one-space jump will allow you to get yourself out, or you need to get yourself out more to the left rather than the center. So there's a lot of things that can happen here, but too often I see only the 2 or 3 variations, and there's a lot more variations that you can play because of a few very useful Tesuji. So the most simple one that I've seen is this, and this is of course a very standard variant, and white will usually play either here or here depending on the situation, and the game will continue at pace, and sometimes that's fine. And then the other one that I usually see is black extend up and white push and black defend, something along these lines. And this is another one that I see. But we're going to go over a few different ones and see what their potential is. So one move that you'll see sometimes played is L3. And then players will attempt to cut here. Sometimes this works, but in general you should consider this not a good idea to do as white, generally speaking, because this can oftentimes lead to very bad things happening. This is very bad shape for white to play, and it just gives black too many possibilities. Well, you could consider M2, I suppose, but even that is really helping black out, because at this point, sure, you're maybe stealing eyes, but black is kind of getting himself out without too many problems. And yeah, black isn't really being pressed much. Black is really doing the pressing. So white steals a few points here, but black usually isn't too depressed about this result. So there's 2 moves I really want to focus on here. One of them isn't really a Tesuji, but is a very useful one to know. The other one is the Tesuji that we're really going to focus on. The move that isn't really a Tesuji, but is still very useful, is J3. And this is when you want to minimize the amount of forcing moves that you give to black. And then black can do a variety of things. Sure, M5 is one of them. Of course, black could also just connect back like this. But the main idea with J3 is you're not giving black any additional forcing moves, or at least as few forcing moves as you can, in terms of making eye shape or helping himself. The other idea, of course, is to stop him from over-concentrating you. If D4 was closer, this J3 stops any cutting points from appearing and worries about over-concentration from forcing moves. But it's a pretty special purpose move because you give black more freedom to really get out here. It's much harder to attack black in this particular case if you play J3, so it's a very special purpose idea. But that's not the main point of the lecture. The move we're going to be looking at is a special one, is L4. This is the most aggressive response you can consider against K4, and it requires you to play a Tesuji right after it, or bad things usually happen. But if you play it properly, it can be a devastating counterattack against white. In this particular board position, it might be a bit of an overplay. So for simplicity's sake, we'll give white F3. So we have white playing L4, and black, of course, has no choice but to cut. And then the question is, what does white do from here? And white needs to play a Tesuji here. Any ideas? What's white's move? Because it looks more Tesuji-like. Let's see, we have H3, J2, N3, J3, yeah, just about everything you can think of. Alright, let's take a look at some of these. So I've never actually seen N3 before. I don't really think it works that well though. I think black just plays this, and white is probably pretty unhappy with the result. It doesn't seem like it really works that well. No, kudos for the attempt at creativity, absolutely. So this is an interesting move, actually. I haven't really considered H3 either. Very interesting. So the key with the A, D, and B is, they're all attempting to do the same thing, which is protect K3, which is a good idea. And, since black doesn't really have a ladder here, they're, possible to consider. But, we also can't forget that black has this move. And this move has a fair amount of forcing potential. If white tanukis it, black can do a very substantial amount of damage to the bottom right area. And if white defends against it, the situation here changes a lot. And white ends up getting captured. So white has to be very cautious. Yeah, it's an interesting little Tesuji. So the idea is we actually the K5 Atari. Congrats, you just found the right move. Yes, the Tesuji here is the K5 Atari, and this is a very aggressive move because you're almost violating one of the proverbs of Go, is that you shouldn't first you shouldn't make an Atari when you can't really capture or severely pressure group, and you're hurting your own weak stone by doing it. You're hurting K3, but the critical thing that doing this allows you to do is that it has now been a ladder breaker. Well, yeah, F3. This stone breaks any possible ladders that black can make here. Now, there's still a lot of forcing moves that black has, but this has made it a very open fight. And this is not the easiest fight for black to win. Black has two weak groups in this area that he now has to take care of. And because of F3, these two stones of whites are not in as severe danger as they were. So it's pretty difficult here for black to make both of his groups live without a problem. But this can be a very powerful Tesuji when you're in a fight. If you want to play, very severely and very aggressively, this is definitely something to consider. I would, as with many of the moves here, I would also urge caution when you play this move in the wrong situation. Like, for example, if you were to play this move without the support of F3, it becomes substantially more difficult for you. For example, if black plays up here now, this is difficult for white because black might have double Hane potential at H3. So this is much tougher for white to play with. So the key here is, first off, how much danger are this L4 K5 stone going to be in, and how easily can the J3 K3 stones, how easily can they make it to the D4 or to whatever is safe. So once again, it's a very special purpose move. You really don't seem to like this guy, do you? He's just a hypothetical Go player. Okay, this is going to be the last one that we're going to take a look at for the evening, but it's a very useful one because it's just, I guess what we could say, so damn common. Yeah, we get this kind of situation all the time. This is probably the first joseki that many players learn, and we added a few stones to it. Okay, see you. So I added a few stones, but the general idea in the upper left, of course, is a joseki. So we're going to add on. Oops, no, we're going to go into that one afterwards. No, not that one. Okay. Okay, so this is the idea. So usually when white plays a stone here, it's very, very natural for black to play a move at b17. It does a lot of things. It makes black safer, it attacks white. It's not difficult to see that b17 is a very good move. But the question is, well, what do we do if black doesn't play b17? How should white attack these stones? Any ideas? Right, b17 to start, sure. And black defends. And then the question is, what now? d18. Very good. And this is a move that black actually needs a Tesuji of his own to respond to defend himself. Because it is possible to Tanuki from h17 if you have a really, really good reason. You can actually Tanuki against it. So if you just play the generic response, if you play the generic response, it doesn't work out very well. White just ends up connecting underneath, and black stones look really, really stupid. Yeah, this is not a situation you want to be in as black. So the smarter move to play for black is e18 here. And this is where it can get a little bit complicated. So white goes in here, and what is black's move to counter it? Anyone know what should black do here? Well, okay, I know you do, Arcturus. Yes, b19 is the move here. And then white really has one choice. White, of course, has to play d17. And then black plays here. And now we have a critical question for white. White to play here. White doesn't necessarily die, no. Whoa, lots of ideas. Okay, let's see. So we have some suggestions for white to play. Well, remember, it's white's turn now. So you want white to play c15, b15, e16. I think these are the main ones. Okay, but what about e17? Is this an okay move? I was talking to the Q players. No worries. So the question is, yes, we can't play this because bad things happen. Black to play here? Any ideas from our Q players? Well, c19 technically works, but the cooler move is d19. And it does the same thing, though. Yeah, they do basically the same thing. And so black, of course, is obviously thrilled. So white can't play that way. So, you could play a move like this, but this is really too nice. I mean, this is basically like, this is like white saying he gives up on his 3 stones. I mean, white has invested all of this time into putting his 3 stones in, and then white just gives them up. So it's kind of wasteful. So the usual move that white needs to play is e16. And what does black play here? Black's next move actually is not always easy to find for many Q players. Any idea black to play? Well, d19, I suppose you could play d19, but that doesn't seem very pretty. I mean, you do connect, but white gets a really nice result from it. Oh, you see a move. Go figure. Yeah, empty triangles are ugly, but in this particular case, an empty triangle is actually the best move. Yep, empty triangle for the win. And then white goes back, and then black takes. Well, actually, sometimes white will oftentimes play this move and force, and then come back and take. And this is a trade, in essence. Black gives up some, and white gives up some. Now, in this particular case, maybe white isn't particularly thrilled with this result, so he should be very cautious about doing this kind of playing this kind of way here. But sometimes, yeah, white's not happy in this particular local situation. But just locally, forgetting for a moment, if we forget for a moment about these two stones, just looking in this little upper situation, this is usually considered pretty fair. Yeah, so white maybe doesn't need to play this move all the time. This is a move you want to play only in certain cases because it can end up losing you a good chunk of points if you're not careful. So, for example, sometimes what white might want to consider is perhaps this move. If white wants to build something on the top, or maybe this move if white really wants to make himself more solid there for some reason. And remember, this AGA here hasn't disappeared. It's still there, and if you make a little change on the outside, it can really, really mess up what black can do. For example, in this case, the D18 move becomes vastly more devastating against black if he wants to do it. If we do the same thing, well, yeah, you shouldn't play it just for this purpose, of course. But this extra stone makes it a lot more difficult for black to really do anything. Black is very unsatisfied with this result. Best move for black to remove the AGA. Assuming that it is black's move, well, just respond at B17 from the get-go. If you're not going to do that, you can still do this. Depends where white goes. If black has, assuming for a moment that black has sente right here, depends what's going on the rest of the board. One idea you could consider is this move, or F15 to just get yourself out into the center, maybe put a little pressure on H17. It depends, though, on what is going on the upper right, of course. If you just want to play, absolute simplicity in the corner, you can just play this move. There's, no complexity. Just, I live in the corner, period. So, can you just play C18 first? Oh, and here? No, don't play this move. This is usually a very bad move because white is usually more than happy to just continue to B18, and now black is left without two eyes. And if black really wants, black can do this and then come back here, and black can make two eyes for himself, but black stones are horribly overconcentrated, and black has made himself maybe 6 points or so. Black stones are not happy, and white gets all this in sente. So even with the AGA, B18 is still the only local move that black can play. Now, if you don't want to play anything there, if you just want to directly go out and potentially play this, or directly run out into the center, that's a possibility in some situations. But if you're going to play locally in the corner, it really has to be B18. So let's see, what's and the other Tesuji I want to look at here is, well, first off, let's look at this move, because I see a lot of players getting messed up by this move sometimes. There's a lot of things you can do to respond to it, but responding well is pretty important. So what's the best response here for white? Assuming that white's goal is to connect his stones. There's all sorts of goals you can consider, making a panuki or getting out to the center, but assuming your goal is connect your stones, period. How do I connect my stones? One of the most critical concepts in Go, connect your stones. Don't say just yet. So let's see, B13. Well, black has an interesting move. You can say in a bit, don't worry. I'll just go a bit more into it. But the problem is, it can get cut. And this is really problematic. If white does this, black just spins back up. And white makes a panuki, but black's corner is really nice. I like black's corner a lot, actually. No AGA, really big, and white's panuki isn't that amazing in this particular position. If white does the other move, black just hanes on the other side and cuts off the stone. Once again, black is fairly satisfied. So this move actually doesn't connect up your stones, unfortunately. So what about the other common move? D13. Well, there's a few things that can happen here, but one idea for black is just to do this. And if white cuts, this reverts into the same thing. And if white plays back, black can just do this. And there's still cutting points. And this is maybe possible for white sometimes if he wants to build an outside. But there's a lot of cutting points left for white. So usually this isn't that pleasant for white. So what is everyone saying? Oh, C12, yes. The move here actually is C12 if your objective is to keep your stones connected. But what you have to know is white to play. White to play. Important to know. Right? Because then you can answer if you like. Oh, very good. Yes, B15 is the correct answer. Yes, this is the way for white to connect. It looks like black can escape, but not quite. Even if black really tries to resist, there's just no way black can win this fight. So you want to stay connected to yourself. That's you do it with C12. But there are other things that black can do in this situation if he wants to really mess with white. And one of the most underrated, I think, Tesuji is B12. And this is a really interesting one, actually. This has a lot of potential to do a lot of damage to white if you use it properly. So let's see what can happen. Well, first thing to look at, what happens if white decides to play on top of it? Well, this isn't particularly stressful for black. If white plays on top, I mean, black is more than happy to play this way. No, black is thrilled. Black has just, stolen white's space out from under him, and white needs to struggle to make two eyes now. So this is not a pleasant result for white generally. So usually white needs to respond with a little more vigor to black's move. So in general, white plays the somewhat obvious move of B12. And then black needs to find his Tesuji here. And this is a Dan level Tesuji. Actually, this is like a mid to upper Dan level Tesuji in terms of knowing it. It's not a very easy one to find off the top of your head if you haven't seen it before. Any ideas what black's move is here? I don't expect anyone to find it, actually. It's very difficult to find. Let's see, we have some suggestions for B15. And we have a suggestion for C13. Oh. And D13. Oh, we're trying to figure out black's Tesuji here. Lots of interesting ideas. Oh, and did someone say C15? Huh. All interesting moves. Now, black to play a good move. Alright, so let's see what happens. Let's see what happens with all these moves. Alright, let's take a look. So, if we try C, the problem is white can just cut. And black wins this, or white wins this fight. So that the knight's cut doesn't really work that well, because white can connect under this way. Now this move really looks like it works at first glance, but the problem is black really doesn't have much of a way of winning this fight. Even if black cuts here, white's not going to lose this fight. Even if white just plays very simple and passive. And, there's more complicated ways that white can play. But assuming white just plays very, very simple, white can just do that and manage to kill black's 4 stones. So it doesn't quite work. Good idea, though. Oh, b14. b14 is interesting. Very, very, very complicated, I think. You could actually consider this move. This isn't actually the right answer I was looking for, but this is viciously complicated possibilities, let's just say. Because you can consider this. So this is actually, this has been in which book was this in? This particular variation was in one of the Go books. The book said this is a very, very complicated fight. It's unclear who wins. Yeah, they didn't even tell us who won the fight. I don't know who wins this fight. This is really, really, really complicated. So yeah, I will leave that to you if you guys really want to figure out who wins this fight. But there are way too many variations. Yeah, lazy publishers. So actually, the simple move, though, for black is actually D. Oh, that's right. It was after Joseki. That was the book. After Joseki. That was it. Right. That's what has this variation in it. Okay, so this is actually the correct move. And yeah, it's actually a really good book. So the question is, what should white do about this move? Any ideas? What's white's play? Cry. Okay, but after we cry, what should we do? Because the game still goes on even after we cry. B14, A14, and B15 seem to be our... oh, B14. Okay. B14 and B15 seem to be our moves of choice. Let's take a look at both of them. So this is, of course, the simple connect move. Let's see what black can do. This is the move that immediately comes to mind for black. And this is very, very difficult for white to deal with. Let's look at a few things that white could consider. If white plays on top, black can do a lot of things. The usual idea for black is to cut and then Atari. Now white can actually connect under like this if white wants. But even though white connects under like this is not a good result for white at all, because black has just given himself a free Panuki and Sente. And yeah, he can basically seal in all of his stones with E10, and white is not satisfied with this result. So technically you could connect under, but in reality that is just not good enough to play. So you really just can't do it. Another idea is this move. And a lot of players actually have trouble finding black's next move here. I want to know if anyone has any ideas, because the next move is important. Q players preferably. Yeah, empty triangles are frustrating, aren't they? However, the empty triangle is the correct answer here. Yes, empty triangle for the win. Because no matter what white does, white can't seal black's 3 stones, and also white can't connect under. You know, if black just plays this move, white could just connect underneath. And I mean, that's not great for white, but it's better for white than not connecting underneath. So yeah, the horrible shape of the empty triangle actually does a lot of good here for black. And white's shape is sliced in half, and it's nearly impossible for white to make both of his groups live without any problems. So black is thrilled if this happens. Thrilled. So what about the other move? What about B14? This one is pretty problematic for white. It's not going to end very well for him. The key for black is to play the C12 move and then cut. And this is similar to the situation that we looked at in the bottom area of the board, where we played the diagonal underneath, because we're going to basically sacrifice these 2 stones. We're going to just Atari above and Atari there, and you know, white can capture the 2 stones, but yuck. This is not a pleasant result, we can say, for white. If black managed to get Sente for b15 later on, he can force white to play a very, very ugly a14. So, so I mean, technically you can live as white, but this really isn't even a life worth living. I mean, it's really terrible. So actually, the only move that white has here that is any good is d14. That's really the only way for white to play in this case. And then black has two choices. Black can either play very, very simple, and when black plays like this, he just basically takes the stone, and white doesn't have to play a12 immediately. White could play somewhere else. White could jump out into the center. White could do all sorts of moves. But this is a very simple one, which just gives black the corner and makes white a lot thicker on the outside. Now, if black wants to make it more complicated, there's always room for complications in Go. And this move is particularly complicated if you don't know how to do it. So the first move that occurs to us to maybe try is b15, but this does not work out very well for white. Black doesn't even have to do anything fancy. Black just wins straight up on the liberty fight. You know, no fancy techniques, just win liberty fight by one, period. So white actually has to be a little more clever. What might be a more clever move for white? Any ideas? There you go. Yep, b13. b13 does a lot of good. So black can capture the stone, and white can cut, but this is a very, very different liberty fight. So if black goes to capture, suddenly we have a ko. Because if white fills, or black fills, white loses, or if black fills, black loses this fight. That's a fight that black loses. So black has no choice but to fight a ko here. And this is a pretty big ko. It determines the entire stability of white's group and the future of the left side of the board. So this is one of the more severe continuations that can come about. But the main idea from all this is that b12 is a very, very, very powerful move that has a lot of variations. It's a small Tesuji, but it can do some crazy things if you know how to use it. So with that being said, that's all the small Tesuji I have to show for this evening. I hope you all enjoyed this lecture, and I hope to see you all either probably sometime next week for another lecture. So yeah, thanks guys. I will see y'all next time. Oh, and send me ideas for lectures. Always happy to have more. Adios.